The morning sun had just begun to rise over the skyline of New York City, painting the glass towers with golden light. It was the first day of school at Westbridge High, one of the most prestigious schools in the city, a place where the children of wealthy families arrived in luxury cars, flashing designer clothes, and carrying the weight of their parents' money and reputation. In front of the school, a sleek silver limousine pulled up. The door opened, and out stepped Katrine Walters, the daughter of a billionaire businessman. She was dressed in a perfectly tailored designer uniform that had clearly been altered to stand out from everyone else's. Her blonde hair shimmered in the sunlight, and the diamond-studded bracelet on her wrist glittered as if announcing her status before she even spoke. Students instantly turned to look at her. Some whispered, some smiled, and some ran to greet her as though she were a celebrity. She gave a faint smirk, her chin tilted proudly, as if she already owned the place. "Look at her car," one girl whispered. "She's so gorgeous and rich," another said. Katrine didn't even need to respond. She just waved casually, letting everyone feel lucky to get a glance or a smile from her. She knew the power of money and influence, and she used it. But while all the attention was fixed on her, at the same time, a boy quietly walked past the school gates. He had no limousine, no fancy uniform, no diamond bracelet. His name was Jack Carter. Jack wore a clean but slightly worn uniform. His shoes were old, and his backpack had been patched up more than once. Unlike the others, he had come on foot, walking miles through the city. His dark skin glistened with sweat from the summer heat, and his tired eyes revealed that he had probably woken up long before anyone else just to make it on time. Jack wasn't rich, but he was determined. He was known, at least by teachers, as the boy who always scored top marks in exams, the one who answered questions no one else could, and the one who worked harder than anyone else in the classroom. But among the students, he was invisible, or worse, the target of jokes. The moment Jack entered the schoolyard, whispers began. A group of boys snickered. "Why does he even come here?" one muttered. "Probably begging for attention," another added. And then came the voice that mattered most, Katrine's. She stood with her group of friends, perfectly poised, her words slicing through the air like a knife. "My parents always told me," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "that people like him are nothing but trouble, addicts, thieves, good-for-nothings." Her friends laughed, nodding in agreement, because that's what people did around her. If Katrine said something, it became the truth. She bought loyalty with weekend parties at her mansion, expensive gifts, and endless opportunities for fun. No one wanted to lose her favor, so no one dared to stand against her. Jack heard the words. He paused for just a second, his jaw tightening, but then he walked on, silent, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Inside, however, the sting was real. Every insult stacked onto years of being treated as if his worth was less than the shine of a diamond, bracelet, or the roar of a sports car. In class, things weren't any better. The moment Jack sat down, students shifted their desks away, whispering and laughing. When the teacher wasn't looking, small notes were thrown at him, scribbled words like loser or stay away. Katrine, of course, sat at the front, basking in attention, cracking jokes that made the room roar with laughter. She didn't even have to try. Her money made her powerful, and her power made her untouchable. But Jack endured it. He opened his notebook, took out a pen, and focused. While everyone else wasted their time gossiping, he absorbed every word the teacher said. His mind was sharp, his determination unshakable. He wasn't there to impress classmates. He was there for his future, one far greater than anyone could imagine. Yet no matter how hard he tried, the bullying never stopped. During lunch, he sat alone at the far end of the cafeteria, while laughter and chatter filled the other tables. Students avoided him as though sitting with him would ruin their own reputations. And every time his eyes accidentally met Katrine's across the room, she smirked, the smirk of someone who believed the world belonged only to her kind. But deep down, behind that arrogant smile, was something even she didn't yet realize, a growing curiosity. She noticed that no matter what, Jack never lashed out. He never begged for friends. He never tried to win approval. He simply kept moving forward, focused, disciplined. And though she would never admit it, that quiet strength unsettled her. The first day of school ended the same way. It began, Katrine stepping into her limousine, surrounded by adoring friends, while Jack walked away on foot, shoulders heavy but spirit unbroken. The city swallowed them both in different ways. One into the glittering towers of wealth, the other into the crowded streets of struggle. But fate, unpredictable and merciless, was already preparing the night that would change everything. The first week of school rolled on, but for Jack Carter, each day felt heavier than the last. Westbridge High was supposed to be a place of learning, a place where ambition could shape futures. But for Jack, it was a battlefield where his silence was mistaken for weakness, his hard work dismissed as desperation, and his existence reduced to a cruel joke. Every morning he walked the same long path to school. He passed through noisy streets where vendors sold bagels and coffee, past subway entrances echoing with the rhythm of trains, and through neighborhoods where kids his age laughed as they stepped into cars their parents drove. By the time he reached the school gates, his shoes were already wet from dew or dust, and his uniform carried the faint smell of engine grease from the workshop, where he sometimes helped his father before school. Inside the grand hallways of Westbridge, the air was different. Students bragged about their new iPhones, their summer vacations in Europe, and their latest designer shoes. Jack didn't speak unless he was asked a direct question by a teacher. His silence was his shield, but to his classmates, that silence made him a target. "Hey, Jack," a boy sneered one morning as Jack walked past. "How many hours did you have to beg on the street to afford that backpack?" The group of boys around him burst into laughter. Jack didn't answer. He just adjusted his bag and walked on. His quietness made him harder to provoke, but it also gave bullies the impression that he was easy prey. At the center of it all was Katrine Walters. Her group of friends revolved around her like planets around the sun. Wherever she went, the spotlight followed. She was the queen bee, glamorous, confident, and merciless. If Katrine disapproved of someone, the entire school disapproved of them. "Look at him," she said one afternoon during lunch, loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "He walks everywhere. Doesn't even own a bike. I mean, this is New York City, not some village." Her friends laughed as though it was the funniest thing they had ever heard. Jack sat at the farthest corner of the cafeteria, his tray half full. He didn't look up. He just focused on his food, chewing slowly, ignoring the noise. But inside, he felt the weight of every word. Still, there was something different about Jack. While most kids his age were obsessed with fitting in, he carried himself with quiet dignity. His father had raised him that way. "Respect yourself first." "Son," his dad always said, hands covered in grease at the workshop. "People can try to take away your pride, but they can't take away what you learn. And they can't take away your work." So Jack worked. After school, while his classmates hung out at cafes or malls, Jack walked straight to his father's auto repair shop on the edge of Queens. The smell of oil, gasoline, and rubber filled the air there. Old radios played classic rock while the sound of metal clashing against metal echoed through the garage. His father, Marcus Carter, was a well-known mechanic. People said he was the best in the city, the kind of man who could fix an engine, blindfolded. Jack admired him. He learned from him. He practiced with him. By the age of 16, Jack could replace tires, fix engines, and diagnose problems that even older mechanics sometimes missed. It was in that workshop where Jack felt alive. Every bolt he tightened, every spark plug he replaced, reminded him that skill was worth more than money. Money could buy friends, but skill earned respect. But back at school, none of that mattered. His classmates didn't care if he could rebuild an engine. They only cared about who wore the newest sneakers or who threw the biggest parties. And no one threw parties like Katrine. That Friday night, she hosted her first big event of the school year at her family's mansion in Upper Manhattan. Chandeliers glowed inside as music blasted across the yard. Luxury cars lined the driveway, and waiters in black suits carried trays of food and drinks. It wasn't just a party, it was a display of wealth, a reminder of who ruled the school. Everyone was invited, everyone except Jack. He heard about it the next day in whispers across the hallway. Students bragged about the expensive food, the champagne glasses they borrowed from the mansion, the DJ who played until 3 a.m. They laughed about the pool, the fireworks, the free gifts Katrine gave away just for fun. Jack walked past them without a word. He had spent that same night at the workshop replacing brake pads on a taxi. When his father handed him $20 for the help, Jack felt proud. To him, that money meant survival, not decoration. But the distance between him and his classmates grew wider. To them, he was nothing but the kid who didn't belong. To him, they were children lost in a fantasy of money. Yet fate was patient. It didn't strike right away. It waited, watching, letting the story unfold. And though Katrine laughed the loudest when Jack was humiliated, something inside her had begun to notice the way he never bent under pressure. She noticed how, despite the insults, he still topped every test, still showed up on time, still kept his head high. She didn't know why it bothered her, but it did. That irritation, that curiosity, would soon turn into something neither of them could have predicted, because destiny was quietly building the moment when their worlds would collide. Not in the bright hallways of Westbridge High, but in the darkness of a stormy night. By the time September settled into New York, Westbridge High had already formed its familiar social circles. The wealthy sat on one side, glowing in their comfort and luxury. The rest, ordinary kids, scholarship students, and the invisible ones, remained on the edges, always looking in, never invited to the center. At the very heart of that shining circle was Katrine Walters. If money was a language, she spoke it fluently. Her family's wealth wasn't just a rumor. It was visible in every bracelet, every designer handbag, every limousine ride to school. Her mansion in Upper Manhattan was legendary, not because of its size, but because of the way she used it as a stage to remind everyone just how far above them she stood. And tonight, that stage would glow brighter than ever. Katrine's first official party of the school year had everyone buzzing. Flyers weren't necessary. The entire student body already knew. She made sure of it. Her social media posts, carefully curated selfies in front of chandeliers, teasers of luxury cars, lined up outside her mansion, were enough to guarantee the crowd. By the time the evening arrived, students poured into her house dressed as if they were attending a Hollywood event. Boys in designer jackets, girls in sparkling dresses, all eager not to miss their chance at being in Katrine's spotlight. Inside, the scene was breathtaking. A DJ stood behind a glowing set, blasting music that shook the marble floors. Lights spun across the ceiling, illuminating a buffet of food that looked like it belonged in a five-star hotel. There were endless trays of sparkling drinks, platters of sushi, burgers, and desserts so fancy that most kids didn't even know their names. Katrine floated through it all like a queen surveying her kingdom. Wherever she went, people followed. They laughed when she laughed, danced when she danced, and listened when she spoke. She thrived on the attention, every smile and compliment feeding the pride in her chest. But not everyone was there. Jack Carter wasn't even considered. His name had not been spoken once during the planning of the guest list. Why would it? He didn't belong in the glittering crowd. That night, while music thundered through Katrine's mansion, Jack sat in his father's workshop. The garage smelled of oil and rain, and the dim yellow light of a single bulb illuminated the space. He worked quietly on a broken-down pickup truck, his hands steady, his focus sharp. His father, Marcus, leaned back on a stool, watching with a proud smile. "You're getting good, son," Marcus said, wiping his hands with a rag. Jack only nodded. Praise wasn't something he needed. It was the work itself that mattered. Each bolt tightened, each problem solved, reminded him that progress came not from money, but from persistence. While his classmates danced in designer shoes, Jack wiped grease off his fingers and earned a few dollars that would help pay for groceries. While Katrine handed out expensive souvenirs, Jack saved every cent he made for the future he dreamed of. Back at the party, Katrine stood at the center of her friends, sipping from a crystal glass. She laughed louder than usual, told jokes sharper than ever. But somewhere deep inside, there was an emptiness she didn't want to admit to herself. Because when the crowd cheered her name, it was never for who she truly was. It was for the image she projected. The girl with money, the girl with power, the girl who could buy loyalty with champagne and sushi. She didn't know it yet, but that image would soon begin to crack. Around midnight, the party spilled out into the street. Students shouted, laughed, and stumbled to their cars. Music still pulsed inside the mansion, but the night air was cool, carrying a hint of the storm that was forming somewhere far beyond the city. "Best party ever," one boy shouted as he climbed into a sleek sports car. "Katrine is the Queen of New York," Another yelled, making the group laugh. Katrine smiled, but her eyes drifted toward the distance, toward the dark roads, leading away from the mansion. She had no idea that only a few nights from now, those same roads would test everything she thought she knew about herself. Jack, on the other hand, had already closed the garage for the night. As the storm clouds began to gather, he walked home, the weight of the day heavy on his shoulders. But in his silence, there was strength. He didn't need flashing lights or fireworks. He carried his own fire inside. The universe, it seemed, was preparing to bring two worlds together, one built on gold, the other on grit. And when those worlds finally collided, neither Katrine Walters nor Jack Carter would ever be the same. The storm was coming, and with it, destiny. The city had been buzzing all day about Katrine's latest party. Photos were already flooding social media, selfies in front of her chandelier, videos of fireworks in the backyard, and captions declaring it the party of the year. For most students at Westbridge High, the night ended in laughter, music, and the comfort of their warm beds. But for Katrine Walters, the queen of that glittering night, the evening took a turn she hadn't expected. It was past midnight when she finally decided to head home. Her friends had left one by one, making excuses about strict parents and curfews. Some stumbled into their luxury cars, others called chauffeurs. By the time the last of them waved goodbye, only Katrine remained, sliding behind the wheel of her sleek, jet-black luxury car. The rain had already started, soft at first, then steadily harder. The kind of rain that soaked through everything. Streetlights blurred through the windshield, glowing halos in the storm. Still, she wasn't worried. The car was expensive, powerful, perfect. Machines like this weren't supposed to fail. But as the road curved away from the city, leading past a patch of forest that bordered the highway, the unthinkable happened. The engine coughed, once, twice, then silence. The dashboard lights flickered. The car rolled forward a few more feet before dying completely. Katrine froze. "No, no, no, no," she whispered, slamming her hand against the steering wheel. She tried the ignition again. Nothing. She pressed harder, frustrated, her breath fogging the window. Still nothing. The storm raged outside, rain hammering against the roof like an army of fists. The forest around her was silent except for the howl of the wind. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alone. She pulled out her phone. No signal, of course. Out here, there were no glowing towers, no Wi-Fi, no safety net of wealth. Her frustration turned into fear. She looked at the dark road, the trees swaying violently, shadows moving in the rain. Her mind replayed the stories her parents had always told her, stories about people who lived in bad neighborhoods, people she should never trust, people like Jack. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. And then, through the sheets of rain, a figure appeared in the distance. Someone walking down the road, shoulders hunched, clothes drenched. Step by step, he came closer, the storm almost swallowing him whole. Katrine's heart pounded. Alone in the dark, she didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. When the figure finally stepped into the dim glow of her headlights, she gasped. It was Jack Carter. He stopped when he saw her. For a moment, both of them just stared at each other, disbelief written on their faces.
"Katrine?"
Jack said, his voice raised over the rain. "What are you doing out here?" She frowned, crossing her arms. "My car broke down." "What does it look like?" Her tone was sharp, defensive, because that was easier than admitting she was scared. Jack hesitated. "Do you need help?" Katrine rolled her eyes. "Help? From you? This car is worth more than your entire life. You wouldn't even know where to start." Jack almost turned to walk away. Almost. But something stopped him. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was instinct. He glanced at the car, then back at her. "Let me just take a look." "Can't hurt." Her laugh was bitter. "You fix this? Do you even realize no one has ever touched this car except certified mechanics? You'll probably break it more." Jack didn't respond. He simply stepped forward, rain dripping from his hair, and crouched by the hood. "Pop it open," he said calmly. Katrine sighed, muttering under her breath, but did as he asked. Minutes passed. Jack's hands moved confidently, checking cables, tightening bolts, adjusting wires. The storm raged on, but his focus didn't waver. Finally, he stood, slammed the hood shut, and gestured. "Try it now." Katrine slid back into the driver's seat, skepticism all over her face. She turned the key. The engine roared to life. Her eyes widened. For a second, she forgot to breathe. He had actually fixed it. Jack didn't wait for thanks. He just stepped back, pulling his hood over his head, and turned toward the road. "You're good to go," he said, walking away into the storm. Something in Katrine's chest twisted. Watching him leave, soaked and shivering, guilt stabbed at her. He had every reason to hate her, to leave her stranded, to laugh at her fear. But he hadn't. She rolled down the window. "Wait!" she shouted. "You'll get sick out there. Let me give you a ride." Jack shook his head. "No need. My place is close." Katrine leaned out further. "Don't lie. There's nothing for miles. Just get in, please." He stopped. For a moment, the rain was the only sound between them. Then finally, he walked back and slid into the passenger seat. The car was warm, but the silence was colder than the storm outside. Katrine gripped the wheel. "So, how did you even know how to fix that?" Jack glanced at her. His voice was steady, without pride. "I work with my dad. He's one of the best mechanics in the city. I've been learning from him since I was a kid. That's what I do after school while you guys are at parties." Katrine blinked. Shame flushed her cheeks, though she tried to hide it. She had spent years mocking him, treating him like dirt, assuming he was nothing. And yet here he was, the boy she insulted, saving her from a night of fear. For the first time, she felt the weight of her arrogance. The storm outside began to ease, but inside the car, something far bigger was beginning. Something neither of them could name just yet. Because that night wasn't just about a broken car. It was the night that began to break the walls around Katrine Walters' heart. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of Westbridge High. But the school's polished hallways felt colder than usual. For most students, it was just another day. They laughed, shared stories of last night's parties, and crowded around lockers, swapping jokes and rumors. For Jack Carter, however, it was the same routine of invisibility. He walked through the halls with his books pressed against his chest, quietly navigating past groups of students who barely acknowledged his existence, unless, of course, it was to remind him of his place. He had slept little the night before. After fixing Katrine's car and finally making it home, he had stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. He kept replaying the night in his head, the rain, the breakdown, the look on her face when the engine roared back to life. For years, she had mocked him, humiliated him, made him the target of cruel laughter. Yet in that storm, she had looked fragile, human. Jack shook the thought from his mind. Whatever happened last night was just an accident. She would forget it, and so would he. At least that's what he told himself. By the time he entered his first class, the whispers had already started. He was late again. His father had needed him at the workshop early that morning. And though Jack tried to hurry, grease-stained hands always took time to clean. Look who finally showed up. One boy snickered as Jack slipped into the classroom. "Did your bus break down, or were you too busy fixing bikes for pocket change?" Another added, drawing laughter. Jack ignored them as always and looked for a seat. But the classroom was full. No one shifted to make space. A few students even sprawled across two chairs, pretending not to notice him. Finally, Jack spotted an empty seat near the back and quietly walked toward it. Before he could sit, however, a girl dropped her bag onto the chair with a smirk. "Oops, taken!" The room filled with laughter again. Jack stood frozen for a moment, the familiar sting of humiliation burning inside him. His jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. That was his armor, silence. And then the door opened. Every head turned. Katrine Walters walked in. As always, the energy shifted instantly. Conversations stopped, eyes lit up, and smiles spread across faces. She wore her usual confidence, her golden hair perfectly styled, her designer bag swinging casually at her side. Students straightened in their seats, eager to greet her.
"Katrine!"
Someone called. "Your party was insane. Best night ever." Another chimed in. She smiled, accepting the praise like a queen acknowledging her subjects. But her eyes didn't linger on them. They moved across the room, past the laughing faces, past the eager hands waving hello, until they landed on Jack. He looked back at her, confused. Katrine paused. For a split second, she saw him not as the boy she mocked, but as the boy who had walked through a storm, fixed her car with steady hands, and refused to let her arrogance break his calm. She walked past the front rows, ignoring her friends' attempts to pull her toward them. The entire class followed her movement with wide eyes, whispering in confusion. And then, to everyone's shock, she stopped at the empty seat next to Jack. She set her bag down, turned to the girl who had claimed the chair, and said coldly, "Move your stuff." The girl froze. "But I said move it," Katrine interrupted. Her voice sharp, her eyes flashing with authority. No one disobeyed Katrine Walters. The girl quickly grabbed her bag and shifted away. Katrine sat down next to Jack. The room went silent. Whispers rippled through the class like wildfire. What is she doing? Why is she sitting there? Is this some kind of joke? Jack stared at her, utterly stunned. "What are you doing?" he whispered. Katrine leaned closer, her voice low but firm. "From now on, no one messes with you, got it?" Before Jack could reply, one of the boys in the front row chuckled nervously. "Katrine, you don't want to sit there. That's, Jack's spot." The class giggled. Katrine's head snapped toward him, her expression ice cold. "Say one more word about him," she said, her tone dripping with warning, "and you'll regret it." Silence, absolute silence. The boy sank into his chair, face pale. No one else dared to laugh. Jack sat stiff, disbelief flooding his mind. Was this really happening? Was the same girl who had once led the mockery now defending him? The teacher entered, breaking the tension, and the class scrambled to look busy. But the atmosphere had shifted. Everyone's eyes darted between Katrine and Jack, whispering silently, "Why him? Why now?" Jack tried to focus on the lesson, but his mind was spinning. He didn't trust it. He didn't understand it. And yet, for the first time in years, he didn't feel completely alone in that classroom. Katrine sat beside him, straight-backed, her chin high. But beneath her polished exterior, her thoughts were heavy. She couldn't forget the storm, the fear she'd felt, the calm way he had helped her without asking for anything in return. She remembered her parents' cruel words, the same ones she had repeated for years. "They're nothing but trouble." But last night had proved her parents wrong. And now, in the middle of Westbridge High, Katrine Walters had made a choice. For the first time in her life, she wasn't using her power to humiliate someone. She was using it to protect. And that choice, small as it seemed, would change everything. The classroom incident spread through Westbridge High like wildfire. By lunchtime, whispers had turned into rumors. And rumors had twisted into dramatic tales. "Did you see Katrine sit next to Jack?" She defended him. Actually defended him. Something must have happened. Why else would she care? For years, Katrine Walters had been the standard of who was in and who was out. Her approval could elevate someone to popularity. Her disapproval could crush them. And now, the girl who once mocked Jack Carter more than anyone else was sitting with him, talking to him, even smiling at him. It was the biggest shock Westbridge High had ever seen. At first, no one dared to question her directly. Her friends tried to laugh it off. "Funny prank, Katrine," one of them said, waiting for her to roll her eyes and return to her usual circle. But Katrine didn't laugh. She looked them dead in the eyes and said, "I wasn't joking. If anyone says a word about Jack again, they'll have to deal with me." Her tone was final. The message was clear. Things were different now. Jack struggled to process it. At lunch, when he sat alone as usual, Katrine simply walked over with her tray and sat across from him. The cafeteria froze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the clatter of trays and forks seemed quieter. "Why are you doing this?" Jack asked quietly, eyes narrowing. Katrine looked at him, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "Because I was wrong. About everything. About you." Jack didn't reply. He had spent years enduring her cruelty. Forgiveness wasn't something he could hand out like a free pass. But he didn't push her away either. And that in itself was a start. Over the following weeks, something extraordinary happened. Katrine kept her word. Whenever students tried to make fun of Jack, she shut them down instantly. She used her influence not to isolate him but to protect him. The same power that once fueled cruelty was now used to demand respect. At first, students resisted. Some rolled their eyes, others whispered behind her back. But slowly, her command reshaped the social order. If Katrine Walters said Jack was off limits, then Jack was off limits. For the first time, no one threw notes at him in class. No one blocked his seat. No one mocked his walk to the cafeteria. Jack still wasn't the center of attention, but he was no longer the school's target. And in his quiet world, that small change felt monumental. Outside of school, their paths crossed more often. One afternoon, Katrine asked if she could see the workshop where he worked. Jack hesitated. "Why would you want to?" "Because I want to understand," she said simply. So he brought her there. The moment she stepped inside, her heels clicking against the concrete floor, her eyes widened. It wasn't glamorous. The air smelled of oil and sweat. The walls were lined with dusty tools, and the ground was stained from years of labor. But to Jack, it was home. "This," he explained, wiping his hands on a rag, "is where I spend my time. After school, weekends, whenever I can. My dad taught me everything. I don't need parties or gifts. I've got this." Katrine watched as he worked, calm, steady, precise. She realized that the hands she once mocked for being dirty were the same hands that had saved her on that stormy night. And for the first time, she felt envy, not for his lack of money, but for his sense of purpose. As days turned into weeks, their friendship grew. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes Jack's pride made him distant. Sometimes Katrine's arrogance slipped back. But slowly they learned from each other. Katrine began to see beyond wealth. She realized her father's empire, her mansion, her expensive clothes, none of it defined who she truly was. What mattered was how she treated people, especially those who had nothing to offer her in return. Jack, on the other hand, learned that not everyone with privilege was beyond redemption. People could change if they were willing. By the end of the semester, Westbridge High had transformed in small but powerful ways. Students still laughed, still partied, still bragged, but they also thought twice before mocking someone for being different. The whispers about Jack faded. The insults disappeared. One crisp winter morning, as snow dusted the city streets, Jack walked into school to find something he never expected, a seat saved for him. By choice, not by force. And as he sat down, he caught Katrine's eye across the room. She smiled, not the smug, arrogant smile she used to wear, but a genuine one, the kind that carried warmth. Jack nodded back, a silent thank you. In that moment, he realized something. The stormy night when their worlds collided hadn't just fixed a broken car. It had fixed something far deeper, something inside both of them. The lesson: wealth can buy comfort. It can buy attention, but it can't buy respect, resilience, or true friendship. That night in the storm, Katrine Walters learned that strength isn't about the car you drive, it's about the person you become when everything else is stripped away. And Jack Carter, he proved that even when the world mocks you, even when you walk alone, dignity and hard work can carry you further than any limousine ever could. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to comment your thoughts, hit the like button, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this.